Total Screen proudly presents their official podcast, On Screen, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Everybody, and welcome to On Screen, the official podcast of the Total Screen. My name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And today we are going to be talking about Mad Max: The Fury Road. Or is it just Mad Max Fury Road, I guess? We're going to be talking about that in our full spoiler segment. We also have some stuff to look forward to on the horizon that we're going to talk about. We got a news segment with one trailer and a few other news stories to go over. And then we're also going to do our On Tap segment, where we're going to talk a little bit about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Not so much about the movie's own merits, strengths, weaknesses, or anything, but about the fact that the director who did that movie is going to be doing the Legend of Zelda movie, and some thoughts I had while watching Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. How I kept thinking about Zelda as I watched it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But anyways, my name is Tyson.
My name is Will.
And let's get started with our On the Horizon segment.
On the horizon. On the horizon.
On the Horizon, as I've mentioned, is where we talk about what's coming up on the horizon. And we're going to start things off with Tuesday, June 4th, which is when The Acolyte premieres on Disney+. This is the new Jedi show that's coming that takes place before the prequels. I think a long time before the prequels, if I'm not mistaken. Going to be coming on Tuesday, June 4th on Disney+. Then, Clipped is also coming on Tuesday, June 4th, but to Hulu. This is a limited series, and it's about the disgraced former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers, the one that was forced to sell his team because, audio tapes of him going on racist tirades were released.
Oh, jeez. Yikes.
This is going to be a limited series starring Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy himself, as Donald Sterling. And also on Tuesday, June 4th, Killer Klowns from Outer Space, the game, is coming out on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Switch. This is the latest horror entry game that, horror movie turned game that's like a multiplayer asymmetric experience.
Yeah, which seems to be the preferred way to adapt horror franchises to games these days, apparently.
They did Friday the 13th, they did Evil Dead, they did that one that's like all
Dead
the
by Daylight.
Yeah, Dead by Daylight that's got all the different horror franchises in it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But Killer Clowns from Outer Space, I remember that movie. Did you ever see that?
Oh, yeah, I saw that. When I was a kid, I saw that.
You were traumatized by it as a child.
Oh, yeah, I was traumatized. My sister loved it too, but also made her afraid of clowns as well.
I just remember that clown using, he killed a cop or something and was using him as a puppet. Had his hand in the back of his head and was manipulating him like a puppet or something. I remember that. That's what I remember of this movie.
It's been it's been forever.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dead by Daylight, I saw the newest update. They're going to be adding a Castlevania to Dead by Daylight.
Because it's not just horror movies anymore. Now it's just horror anything.
Yeah, horror anything.
Anything horror adjacent.
Yeah, because
they're going to put Sam and Dean Winchester in there next.
They could, yeah. they already, in the last update, they already added Vecna from Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, there you go. Also on Tuesday, June 4th, Star Wars Hunters is coming to the Nintendo Switch and mobile. Do you remember when this was nobody'd heard about this, and then they just released a title screen grab in the middle of a Nintendo Direct?
I remember
and
that,
everyone was like, what the hell? Some Star Wars game coming to Switch? And then you see the Zynga logo and everyone went, oh.
Yeah, everybody audible groans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody was excited.
Yeah.
They didn't show anything of the game, but everybody was excited, and then the Zynga logo popped up.
There's going to be some free-to-play BS.
Yeah.
That's
coming on Tuesday, June 4th.
Woo!
On Thursday, June 6th, Sweet Tooth is returning for its third and final season on Netflix. I'm looking forward to that. That's a lighthearted dystopia. And on Friday, June 7th, Fantasmas is coming to HBO Max. I don't know too terribly much about this. I watched a trailer for it. It's from the creator and star of Lots of Spookies, which is like a really weird, funny show on HBO. So I'm kind of curious what this is going to be like. The trailer tells me a little bit, but I'm interested in where it's going to go, like to be a compelling series for more than like one episode, what it's going to do. Hitman, not based on the game.
No, that was Timothy Oliphant.
Yeah.
Timothy
Oliphant one time. There's somebody else another time.
Yeah. They couldn't get Timothy Oliphant to do it another time. He only did it because it allowed him to buy a house.
Yeah.
He had the house by the time the sequel came out, so he wasn't doing it again.
Yeah. But this is another movie called Hitman, unrelated to the game. It stars Glenn Powell, who was in Top Gun Maverick. He plays a professor who works with the police as a like fake assassin, getting people to like, you know, like he'll show up, he'll communicate with people and then show up to do a meet like he's going to be an assassin, and then they bust the person, like that kind of thing. That's coming on Friday, June 7th to Netflix. Then also coming on Friday, June 7th, we have 2 movies coming out in movie theaters, Bad Boys Ride or Die and The Watchers, which is the new one. It's not from M. Night Shyamalan. He's producing it, but he's not
it's from his
directing
daughter.
it. Yeah. But
that's right.
If you want to watch a movie that makes you go, what a twist.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
Check out The Watchers on Friday, June 7th in theaters. But that is it for our On the Horizon segment. And now we're going to move on to On Tap.
What we've been watching. What we've been playing. What's on tap.
On Tap is where we talk about, it's kind of like our full spoilers segment, except instead of going into things at full spoilers, it's more like brief impressions or, you know, just kind of information based on what it's doing for us in some particular way. Like this week, we're going to be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which I watched. Will has not seen, but I've seen. And I'm not going to be talking about the movie for its own merits and its own faults or anything. I'm going to be talking about it because the director of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the guy who's going to be taking on The Legend of Zelda.
Right.
And so I've seen other movies by him. I've seen the Maze Runner movies that he also did.
Right.
But it's been a while, and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is much bigger budget, much more like of a large-scale movie. And based on some of the imagery I saw in the trailers and stuff, I'm like, this actually might give a bit of an idea as to how this guy would handle a Zelda movie.
Right.
And honestly, I think he'd probably do a really good Zelda movie. I think he might do a good Lord of the Rings movie.
Mm-hmm.
It fits. Like Planet of the Apes, like, this isn't like one of the older ones. This is like, it has like a very almost medieval feel to it. So it kind of fits into that kind of fantasy scope of ththings. Like early on, like the first scene of the movie is like this funeral thing that happened way before. And then the second, like, real scene starts with this group of 3 apes, the main character and his friends, basically, and they're going to find these, eggs, these, like, eagle eggs, because they raise eagles. And so they're going through this, like, it's like a city, but it looks like a giant forest or something, because everything's overgrown. It's been generations since humanity fell at this point.
Right, yeah.
So everything's completely overgrown, everything's turned into this, like, jungle, basically. So it's like a city, but it literally just looks like a jungle, really.
What's your level of familiarity with the Planet of the Apes franchise?
We talked about this before. I've seen the original movies, like way back when I was a kid.
Also,
I
like
haven't
all the
seen
originals?
any of the modern ones. I saw the Tim Burton one. I haven't seen any of the other modern ones. This is the first
okay.
one. You don't really need to have seen
No,
the other ones. This one, like I said, takes place like hundreds of years, if not more, after
like the last
one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's continuing in the same world as the reboot trilogy, but this is like, okay, we're saying this like so far apart that, yeah, you don't need to have watched the previous movies to like get into this.
Well, like, for example, the main character, the main ape in this one is named Noah.
Caesar.
It's not Caesar. He's named Noah. He's young.
Right.
He's kind of, the thing I mentioned where him and his friends are going to get eagle eggs, that's like a coming of age ceremony. So he's like right at that age, you know, that's when it happened. That's when this starts. And when they encounter a human for the first time, none of them have ever seen one. They call them them echoes, not humans, like this group. Like other groups call them humans. Like you meet other apes later. But they'd never seen a human before. They've only known them to be like silent and stupid creatures.
Right.
Like they have no concept that humans used to rule them.
Right.
Like that's how disconnected this is from the previous one. It's so disconnected that the main characters don't even know what humans were, like at all. Like not even stories, nothing. They call them echoes, and they just think they're like a stupid animal. That's it. But yeah, so immediately, right from the coming of age aspect, I'm like, I went into this movie thinking about Zelda because it's going to be the director of Zelda. And immediately I'm getting Zelda vibes. I'm thinking like, oh, this almost kind of feels like a Zelda opening, like where Link gets sent out to like retrieve the Master Sword or something, like the tutorial stages in a Zelda game.
Right.
You know? And you have to go, and it's usually like maybe part of a coming of age ceremony or something like that, you know, or like in Wind Waker, he has to wear the traditional clothes of the hero, or those. It kind of has that kind of a vibe. Like they're going on this coming of age journey, and they're testing their bravery, and they're going through, and there's lots of climbing. They're apes, you know, which in the climbing and as well as all the runes reminded me of Breath of the Wild. When they go back to their home village, it really, really strikingly reminded me of the Rito village in Breath of the Wild. Just like, it just kind of looked like it a little bit. Like it's set just kind of out in a field. It's not like in the middle of a lake or something like that one is. But it has like these big pillars that they'd set up because they've trained eagles and stuff, like I said. So they have these big pillar things that are like made out of wood and stuff. So it immediately made me think of like Rito Village in Breath of the Wild. And a lot of the locations made me think of that. And a lot of just the fact that the character like barely talks. Like Noah doesn't talk much. He's a man of few words. And I'm like, well, that's very Link-like in a way. Like Link doesn't talk, you know, in games, there are times where he does talk, but we don't hear him talk. Like, you know, if you play like Twilight Princess or something, they'll give you like an audio, like a choice of a dialogue choice or something. And it's implied that Link speaks that to the other character. And then the character returns, you know, a comment to you, but you never hear Link actually say that. Well, it's like, even with all of those dialogue choice moments, Link is still just a character of very little dialogue. Not even talking about the fact that he literally doesn't speak. But I mean, just like adding up all his dialogue options, he speaks way less than the characters around him did. And that's like Noah in this. Noah's an ape of few words. He makes, every so often he'll say something. Usually it's something kind of profound and meaningful. Not necessarily like super deep, but like profound meaning like emotionally so or something. But it's like, yeah, well that might be how you do Link. You don't want to make him a chatterbox. You don't want him to be talking so much that he's saying like, excuse me, princess, you know? You don't want any of that shit going on. So having him be kind of a man of few words, like that would kind of work. And it kind of works here with Noah, where like the characters around him are doing most of the talking. So he'll encounter a character, he gets separated from his friends and the people in his village. He encounters like an orangutan character, and that character talks a lot more. And when he meets him and that character is talking to him a lot, I'm like, this really reminds me of the way they do companion characters in Zelda games, like Midna or Navi or Fi or any of the other companion characters that you have in Zelda games, where they're usually chatterboxes while Link is silent. It's like, yeah, this kind of works. And so I kind of got that feeling. And then there's just this like grand sense of like, you know, there's a great bridge crossing scene and stuff that I'm like, just feels like it could really go into like a Zelda game. There's an enemy, there's a villain in the movie. He's not the main villain. He's one of the other villains. And it reminded me of, you remember that one character in Twilight Princess when you fight him as Link like several times. He's like rides on the back of like a warthog or some kind of giant beast. And like you do that joust on the bridge against him and stuff. He abducts the kids at the beginning of the game. You know, that guy. Like how he doesn't really have much dialogue, but he kind of like stands out as this recurring villain character that you encounter multiple times throughout the game. Like that felt very much like this ape character that I'm talking about in this movie. Like there's a character that's like that. He's like this leader of this raider group he's not the main villain. He's like a lieutenant under the main villain or something. something. And the main villain is really like charismatic, which makes me like excited at the prospects of what might be done with like Ganondorf being like a charismatic leader who's like also a villain, you know? So I walked away from this movie feeling like, yeah, this guy could do a Zelda movie. Now, of course, this movie, I believe, has different writers than the Zelda movie is going to have.
Yeah, I mean,
So I'm talking a lot about story elements. That doesn't necessarily apply to a director, to what the director is going to bring to the table. So it still could be a complete fuck up if the writers are bad, you know? But I think I have a lot more faith in the project after seeing this movie than I did before.
Nice.
So that's what I have to say about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the movie's own faults and benefits, like where it excels and where it doesn't or anything. Just wanted to talk about it in the context of The Legend of Zelda. But that's it for our On Tap segment, and now we're moving on to On Beat. On Beat. On Beat is our news segment, and we've got a few news stories and one trailer to talk about. Let's start things off with the next movie in the Knives Out franchise, which is titled Wake Up Dead Man, has been announced by Netflix.
Yeah.
So you haven't seen Knives Out, right? You saw Glass Onion, but not Knives Out?
Right, I still haven't watched the first one.
Okay.
Not that it matters. I mean, these are all kind of like pretty much unrelated stories, just with Daniel Craig's character as the connecting thread.
It's very much just a modern version of the Agatha Christie ones.
Right, yeah.
Which they've been turning into movies as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a detective series.
Yeah,
about
like
Daniel
those
Craig's
movies
character.
would have like Detective Poirot, played by Kenneth Branagh or whatever, and he just plays the same character, and there's some connective tissue about his character and his backstory and why he is the way he is that carries over from movie to movie.
Right, the character carries over, but like the
but
other elements,
all the
like,
other
really,
characters aren't connected, and
nobody's gonna be like in this movie is gonna be like related to like somebody from like Knives Out or some shit.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's disconnected in that way. But yeah, so I've seen both of them, and I'm kind of excited about this. I think Glass Onion had strengths and weaknesses. Same thing with Knives Out, but I think in general they were both fun movies.
They're fun movies. I didn't really like the like mystery in Glass Onion too much because it was like way too obvious, and I thought like the movie was way too smug in thinking it was being meta by like just having an obvious mystery be obvious and like thinking that was like supposed to be clever. I was like, man, that was disappointing. But like the movie was fun. I like Daniel Craig. I like the various characters they got in there.
Good ensemble cast of like
good ensemble
real
cast.
Characters, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like who's in this movie and you know, because Knives Out also had like a huge ensemble cast. I mean, Knives Out had Don Johnson, fucking Chris Evans. Jamie Lee Curtis. Michael Shannon, he played like Zod in the Superman movie, the Man of Steel, you know?
Right. Oh yeah.
He's in it. Yeah. There's like a great cast in that movie, you know? And of course, Glass Onion, Edward Norton, Batista, you know, lots of big names there as well. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of cast they have and what kind of characters.
Yeah, like, Wake Up Dead Man is going to have Kerry Washington, Josh O'Connor, Kylie Spaney, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and Andrew Scott.
Andrew Scott, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Andrew Scott has been confirmed for it. There's rumors that they're also going to get Tom Hardy and Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, Tom Hardy would be amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and Glenn Close. Glenn Close just announced he joined the cast.
There you go. We needed like a really big female actor. You know, all of them have had really big female actors. The first one, like I said, with Jamie Lee Curtis, you know. So yeah, that makes sense.
Peter Capaldi also.
Oh yeah, there you go. So you have like a lot of like character actors, really, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great. Good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But that was just announced. Nothing really else besides that. Just the announce of the title and that it was coming. That's it. Speaking of new things coming, Dexter is getting a prequel series. This was already known that it was in development, but they announced the cast. It's going to take place when Dexter is young, and it's going to feature his father, who was dead through the entire run of the original series. He just would show up in flashbacks.
Right.
And Deborah's going to be in it again.
And since this is young Dexter, so we can have his dad in it, not as like his dark passenger.
Yeah, it's going to be Patrick Gibson playing Dexter. Dexter.
Yeah.
Molly Brown playing Deborah. These are both kind of lesser-known actors. I know Patrick Gibson from Shadow and Bone. Molly Brown, I guess, was in Billions. I don't really watch that, so I don't really know much about her. But the bigger name is Christian Slater is going to be playing their father, Harry.
Yes.
Who, it's interesting because he was played by, since he was only in flashbacks in the original series, like that covered it when he was young, you know, like when Dexter was young, like that same time period, basically. Even when Dexter was like a little kid, like not even a teenager, like when he was a child, you know, like it was that actor playing, this one specific actor was playing him throughout that entire run of Dexter. So it's interesting to have somebody different and especially to have somebody that's kind of notable and recognizable like Christian Slater.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Who, as you mentioned before the podcast, and I guess in his dad phase now of roles. After playing the father in Mr. Robot, you know. But yeah, that is the Dexter prequel series.
Yeah, apparently, like, they have to do a Dexter prequel because I guess, like, Michael C. Hall is done with the character. I mean, they killed off Dexter Morgan at the end of New Blood, so it's not really... Yeah. Spoilers, whoops.
Here's the thing. When Dexter was originally running, it got progressively worse over the years. Like, season 1 was great. Season 4 was great. Season 2 and 3 were okay, but season 4 is a notable step up from that. After season 4, it just downslid, like, hard. It went from being one of the best shows on TV to being one of the worst shows on TV.
Yeah.
Just, like, very quickly. Better. Yeah, it wasn't just like it wasn't just like it had a disappointing ending. Like, it just progressively got worse, like, every season.
It did have a bad ending, too.
And it did have a really bad ending, too.
Jesus.
It's also worth noting that before they ended up doing the spin-off series, that Dexter New Blood series that you'd mentioned, before they did that, like, the Showtime's boss was like, immediately at the end of the Dexter series said, yeah, we're interested in a Dexter spin-off, but only if it's Michael C. Hall as Dexter.
Yeah.
Which just showed that it's like, well, then would it really be a spin-off? It's just Dexter, you know?
Yeah, it's just more Dexter. How's that spin-off?
I mean, New Blood made sense to kind of be a spin-off, I guess, just because it took place years later, you know?
Right, in a different setting, or whatever. Yeah. It's kind of like when they did the All in the Family spin-off, it was still focused on Archie Bunker as the main character, but it was like he was a completely different setting, and the rest of the cast was like different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, kind of makes sense there. But what I remember about the Dexter series, one of the most egregious things about Dexter was that as the seasons went on, they kept trying to find ways to justify the rest of the cast, like the secondary cast. Like, right, besides Dexter and Deb and the big players, you know, they kept going like, oh, we need Detective Batista to be showing up again. Let's give him some story where he's going through a divorce. And it was like the most lazy, boring storytelling. It was just like, we just have to have something for this character to do. And it was like CBS procedural level storytelling.
Yeah, exactly.
It was horrible. And the original show ended the same month that Breaking Bad ended.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And yeah, one was one of the best series of all time with one of the worst endings of all time. And one was one of the best series of all time with one of the best endings of all time.
Oh yeah. It's just a beautiful, beautiful series.
Dexter, you mean, right?
Of course. Of course. Too bad they only made 4 seasons.
So yeah, a few reasons why I'm not going to be watching this show. One, I never watched Dexter New Blood. 2, Dexter became horrible as it went on, and I have no faith in it getting better. And 3, I don't have Showtime or anything like Showtime anymore, and will have no plans of ever getting it because nothing else Showtime makes has even the slightest bit of interest to me. Our next news story, Jeffrey Wright is going to be reprising his role in The Last of Us Season 2. And by that I mean his role from the video game, The Last of Us 2.
Right, yeah, because I recall Jeffrey Wright from the first season of the show. Like, I think I would remember seeing him.
As you mentioned, I mentioned this to you before we started, a lot of the big voice actors from The Last of Us were in Season 1 of The Last of Us in different roles.
Oh, yeah, they had,
and then some some of them in the same roles. Like, what's his name? The guy who played Tommy was in the game, was in, like, what was a character in one of the episodes, I think. And I think the guy who played Joel was in it too. And Ellie, the voice actress for Ellie from the games was Ellie's mom in like a flashback scene. So it's like they did a lot to kind of honor the voice actors from the game and to give them work and stuff, which is really cool. But there's only one I can remember specifically playing the same character. And that was that one, the leader of the group of Fireflies that we met.
Right.
Like she was the same actress playing the same character.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Jeffrey Wright is pretty well known. He's probably one of the more high profile people that they got for the games. So having him come back and reprise just makes sense. Because, like, he's a good actor, and, you know, and that is, like, a sellable name.
Yeah, so he's also a big HBO actor, so he's already got ties to the network, and...
Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense to keep him on for that role. Like, it would make less sense to recast that role.
Yeah,
like,
and I've seen... I haven't played Last of Us 2, but I saw pictures and the stories of the thing, and they basically made the character look exactly like him.
Right.
In the game, so he's gonna look like you. He's gonna look exactly like his character.
but yeah, that's happening. Jeffrey Wright in Last of Us Season 2 should be good.
Next, our next news story is we got a trailer for Beetlejuice. We had a tease before that kind of really didn't show much, and we got a lot more this time. I have something specific to say about it that I think's really interesting, but I wanted to hear from you first. What did you think of this trailer?
Oh, it was alright. I thought it looked fine. It does bank heavily. There is the nostalgia callbacks. There's the shrunken head guy. You know, there's the sandworms. Like all the big hits from the first movie, which is fine, really. I mean, it looked alright. I wasn't, like, blown away by it or anything, but it looks like it could be fun.
I can say the one thing that kind of surprised me, and kind of did blow me away a little bit, and it's funny because I've taken the exact opposite stance with other movies, and that's that apparently Tim Burton has decided to go, like, all practical effects with Beetlejuice.
Oh yeah, he said
which I think is great because of the nostalgia, because stuff looks like it did in the original movie. Like the sandworm scene looks a little janky, like it did in the original movie. So it gives it like a sense of continuity.
That was stop motion in the original, so I'm assuming it's still stop motion here. Yeah, it gives it visual continuity, like which is great. I think that's actually important.
See, it's funny because I have the exact opposite reaction with Oppenheimer, where I've mentioned it to you several times. I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast. I think I did mention on the podcast, but I was really disappointed by the nuclear explosion in Oppenheimer.
Yeah,
I thought it was really stupid that they relied so much on practical effects for it, that they, to the detriment of a nuclear explosion, where it just doesn't look nearly as threatening, as big, or as prominent, or as important as the nuke in the actual nuclear blast was, you know? And they could have done that using a combination of CG and special effects, or they could have even done it practically if they did it in like compositing, where they did multiple shots and put them together and used miniatures and did other things to really make it work. But Nolan wanted it all to be like in camera. So you see a character looking out over the expanse and you see the explosion in the distance and stuff. He wanted all of that to be in there, and I think it hurt the movie more than anything. I think it hurt the movie badly, in my opinion. And I think there's other scenes in that movie where also the forcing of practical effects hurt the movie in other areas too. There was a dream sequence that Oppenheimer had, or something that also I think was
right
by adhering to practical effects. But I have the exact opposite impression here because it's a continuation of an existing movie. It's like the sequel to an existing franchise. So it's like, I love the visual continuity. You don't really see that, you know? You don't, when you see like a sequel to something that's then came out 20 plus years ago, everything looks updated. It doesn't look the same anymore. It's like, and there's like a bit of charm that's lost because of that. And I think in this case, it's all there. Like the stop motion effects look like old 1980s, 1990s Tim Burton stop motion effects, you know? They look exactly like they did. And there's something about that I absolutely adore. But that's what I have to say about trailer. I think it looks good, but I think the thing that really got me was all the stop motion stuff. That's what really got me.
Right.
And then our last news story is kind of a segue into our last segment as well. And that is that, unfortunately, Furiosa had a pretty bad box office reception. I mean, it's not like a complete bomb, but it kind of is for the budget.
I believe it's like the lowest Memorial Day weekend box office gross in a long time, like since like the 80s or something.
Yeah.
I heard like since Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah. If this movie had been made on a more reasonable budget, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, I think. I think this would have been a fine opening.
Right. But also, like, and we're going to talk about soon, like, after watching, like, Fury Road, I'm like, no, this justifies the budget.
Oh, I'm glad it has a big budget. I just don't think it's smart that it had a big budget as far as making the movie goes, business-wise, you know?
Yeah, business-wise. But man, yeah, it wouldn't be what it is without the visual spectacle it delivers.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about Fury Road in our next segment.
Yes.
But the stats to go over on this is that this made $32 million domestic, $68.5 million global, on a budget of $168 million. This is only its first week, so it's still going to make some more, but usually doesn't go up in the second week.
No,
Usually movies decline quite notably, like more than 50% by its second week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the business that you get in the first week is you get all the people who were excited to see it, like day one, like the diehards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who probably like had the date penciled in on their calendar, like we're going to go see this, and then that audience goes and watches it, and they fall away, and then for the rest of its run, you get audiences who are like, oh, you know, like, oh, we should go see a movie. Oh, what's playing? Oh, yeah, Furiosa. I heard that was good. Like you get that audience. And then, like, the audience just dwindles from there week to week.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that the saddest news to come from this is that it's looking like, and reports are coming in, so it's rumored that we know that there was another Mad Max universe movie kind of in development in some form, like it was written, I guess. It wasn't in pre-production, but it was written. And it's looking like that's probably not going to happen now. And that not only is that not going to happen, but it's not looking great for future prospects for the franchise in general.
Right. Fury Road did not open, like, super high either. It was, like, 43 million, but this is, like, 10 million less of an opening than Fury Road. And also, Furiosa was greenlit under the old regime at Warner Brothers. Because, like, Fury Road did not do, like, massive box office numbers, but it had a huge cultural impact, won a lot of awards. The previous regime at Warner Brothers really, really valued that and greenlit more, you know, because they thought they could ride that wave. Now we're in the David Zaslav era where
the bank owners have taken over.
The bank owners have taken over, and by what we've seen of him, it's clear he cares more about the bottom line than award season. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he came into the HBO Max, HBO merger, or not HBO, the Warner merger from Discovery, where he was piloting a ton of, like, really, really bad reality shows.
Yeah, exactly.
That's his focus, is just what makes money quickly. And sometimes that could work towards our benefit, you know? If you really love Harry Potter, you're gonna get a Harry Potter TV series that's probably got, like, a really high budget, and it's gonna look phenomenal. Congratulations, you know?
Because David Zaslav said, you know, like, he wants to push what he views as Warner Brothers' top IPs, which according to David Zaslav is DC, Harry Potter, and Lord of the Rings. So they're going to put a ton of that into development.
Yeah, and Game of Thrones obviously is something that was already existing as far as a strategy like that already.
Right, yeah, exactly. Mad Max isn't one of, like, the 10-pole IPs. Like, David Zaslav has never said that. So, yeah.
So not a great sign for Furiosa, unfortunately. Furiosa's already out, so I guess that doesn't really matter. Not a great sign for the Mad Max franchise in the future.
Right.
Very unfortunate. But this could have been predictable. Even Fury Road was a huge, like, lightning in a bottle cultural phenomenal moment. And that did, I think, 40 million, where this did 32?
Yeah, exactly. So, like, again, it wasn't like, this was never, like, a blockbuster franchise. Like, even, like, in its heyday. Like, it never did, like, Star Wars numbers.
I think the original movie did, like, just over 1 million in its opening weekend.
And I think the saving grace there was it was an indie film that didn't cost a lot to make at the time. And they got 2 sequels out of it back then, you know, more so. I mean, pretty good. But yeah, it just never, like, set the world on fire. I consider it bittersweet for a couple of reasons, because obviously we want more. It'd be great to get our Mad Max movie, but at the same time, the way these corporations, you know, these work is like, if this was like a massive, like, cultural success, the milking machine would go.
They would have pulled it
full
out of
gear.
George Miller's hands.
Yeah, but
And it would have,
the milking machine would be in full steam, and they just make bullshit.
Yeah.
You know.
This is a franchise that's pretty pure. I mean, every entry in the franchise has been done by the same guy.
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly.
It's pretty pure, and like,
so,
that wouldn't survive a milking process.
Yeah, so I feel like if Furiosa is like the last thing I get, at least it's going out on a high note.
Yeah, I mean, at least the fact that we're getting Furiosa is kind of a miracle in the first place. So.
Yeah,
the fact that we got Fury Road was kind of a miracle in the first place. That was that movie was supposed to be made over the course of 20 years. They kept trying to make it, and it fell through. I think in the early 2000s, Mel Gibson was supposed to return for it, and then weeks before they were going to go into production, the whole thing fell apart. And Mel Gibson pulled out and said he didn't want to do it, and the whole thing fell apart. And then he
Tom
tried to,
better.
and then George Miller just kept trying to make it, and it took another decade before he was able to make Fury Road.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, this is kind of a miracle that we got, Fury Road, and then another miracle that we got Furiosa. Because these are just not mainstream movies. But that's it for our news section. And speaking of Mad Max Fury Road, we're going to head right into full spoilers. Full Spoilers is where we talk about things in full spoilers, and of course we are talking about Mad Max Fury Road, which I have not seen. Let me give my reason for why I hadn't seen it before. Okay. I live in the desert in California. Not just California in general being a desert, but I specifically live in a desert town in California.
You live Fury Road every day.
Yeah.
You're on the war convoy.
So every time I would see trailers for Fury Road, everybody was so psyched for it. And I'm like, yeah, the action looks good and everything. All I could think is God, it just looks hot and miserable. Like I feel right now.
oh yeah. It looks oppressive.
Yeah.
Which is yeah.
So it just was kind of a mood thing for me. I couldn't get myself interested in watching it just because I just didn't want to watch anything set in the desert, It took a lot.
Right.
Anything set in the desert took a lot to get me interested in watching it. Just because I live that every day. And so it was hard for me to get into. So I came in kind of expecting when we decided to watch this, it was because I wanted to watch Furiosa. I'm like, I'm gonna watch Furiosa in theaters. And before I see that in theaters, I need to watch Fury Road. And I'd seen the old Mad Max movies a long time ago, but hadn't seen Fury Road. So I'm like, I need to watch Fury Road, and then I can watch Furiosa and everything will be fine then. And so I went into Fury Road kind of expecting everything's going to be brown and dirty and just there's going to be no colors. Everything's going to be gray. And I was surprised almost immediately to find out that's not the case. That this movie had a hell of a lot of color correction going on.
Rainbow of colors.
Yeah, it might be taking place in an orange desert, but they amped up that orange to ridiculously bright levels. And then they added purples and greens to the horizon. And yeah, it's a bright and colorful movie.
There's an entire sequence at night where everything is blue. There's the most amazing sequence in the entire film is when they drive into that storm. And oh my word, the colors.
Yeah, it's just, they did so much with the cars. They did so much with hyper-realism, with a high shutter speed. They cranked the speed of the film, which is an old thing. Most people, when you hear about film cranking, it's they're referring to martial art movies, where they speed up the footage just a little bit to make the actors look like they're moving faster than they actually are. And that was an old trick in 1970s, Hong Kong movies and stuff. I believe it's called undercrank is what they call it. But they cranked the footage here. There's lots of times where stuff's moving fast. But it's all to the objective of the visual aesthetic. It's not to make the stunts look better or something. They already look fantastic.
No. Yeah.
It's just the visual aesthetic. It's just to give you that that adrenaline pumping visual aesthetic that the movie has. And the movie is basically, it's just an action scene. The whole movie, really.
Yeah.
It's an action scene in parts.
Action scene. Yeah, exactly. It's one big chase action movie. I mean, it's got fantastic action sequences in there,
It starts in a location, and they head out of that location almost immediately, and then the whole movie is them on the road until they reach the end of their destination, and then they decide to come back.
Yeah.
And so the whole movie is commuting through the entire thing. They're commuting the entire path, And so there's something kind of cool about that like, there's a little bit of backstory. I mean, it starts with the character of Max being captured and he's like trying to escape and he gets knocked out and he's tied up and you kind of see a little bit of what the area he's in is like and what the kind of makeup of it is. But all of that stuff goes by so quick.
A blood bag for a war boy played by Nicholas Hoult.
Yeah, but all that stuff goes by so quick.
Yeah,
and it just jumps immediately. Like, they almost didn't even have to do it. Like, they could have just started with them already on the Fury Road, like, taking off, you know? They could have almost started just like that and left everything out. But it isn't hurt by them including that because it's so brief. It's like literally like, I don't know, 5 minutes of the movie is all the setup, and then it's like just straight into, like, high-octane car chase in the desert, you know?
Oh, yeah. And the basic plot is, like, the main villain, the warlord that's presiding over this area, Immortan Joe. So he's got this thing, I guess, where he has, like, all these brides, and he's impregnating them. And Furiosa is gathered the brides and is trying to steal them away to, like, where she's from, which is, like,
the green place, I think she calls it.
The green place, she calls it, yeah. And
so she talks about the fact that she was abducted.
Yeah,
she was taken from this green place, and she, you know, never got to go back. She rose up the ranks in Joe's like forces as like his imperator, like his like kind of almost like a general like figure, you know?
Yeah, like she commands. She has command over like the war boys and stuff. You know, she is higher rank. Yeah, so she's like a general. And she rose up and she uses this position to betray him and steal away his wives, you know, and this sets off the action. At this point, Max is like, still captured, still a passive participant in what's happening.
He's a hood ornament.
Yeah, he's a hood ornament at this point. You know, he's a hood ornament for a war boy.
Literally strapped to the top of a car with his blood being pumped into the driver.
Yeah, his blood's being pumped into the driver, which is a war boy named Knox, played by Nicholas Hoult. Who is somebody who, like, you know...
A true believer.
He's a true believer. He has low status, low rank in the hierarchy. Like, he's mocked by the other war boys, but he's like...
He thinks Joe's gonna bring him to Valhalla.
Yeah, he thinks Joe's gonna bring him to Valhalla, and he's, like, very, like, gung-ho and, like, ready to prove himself, you know?
Mm-hmm. But he's, like, diseased and dying, basically.
Yes.
He can barely walk, and that's why he needs to be hooked up to somebody for their blood so that he can function, you know?
Right.
Because he's not in great shape. He's got 2 tumors that he's named.
Yeah.
On his shoulder.
Mates.
Yeah. He's not in great shape. And he's doing what he can so that he can die in a great conflict and be honored by Joe and taken to Valhalla. That's what he's a true believer in the cult. The cult of Joe.
So once Immortan Joe, like, realizes Furiosa's betrayed him, he sends his war convoys after her, you know, including, Knox's vehicle with, Max in tow. Eventually they go into a storm. Max is able to free himself, and he's able to upend the vehicle they're in and essentially free himself from Immortan Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And along with it, like he ends up like dragging Knox with him, you know, cause like he's still chained to Knox. That's when Max catches up to Furiosa, gets into a big fight with her, and eventually, like, they settle that. And
like, they kind of get forced together as, like, a, you know, convenient, what's the term? They're in the same boat together. They're both trying to escape from Joe. Joe's really pursuing her, but she's got the vehicle, and he ends up kind of connecting with her, and initially they're hostile towards each other. There's a big fight between them. Then even afterwards, he's basically like holding her at gunpoint as she's driving him. And then as they have to have trust in each other in order to just get out of the situations they're in. And in order to do that, they end up, you know, becoming allies.
Yeah. And Knox tags along because sure.
Well, he's like trying to, like, when Max finally disconnects himself from Knox. Knox is like following them to try to like get back in Joe's good favor. You know, like, oh, if I can bring back his wives, then I'll be so honored. And, you know, like, he's trying to do that, you know? He's not trying to travel with them, but then it comes to a point at which he so disappoints Joe. Joe even like drives off and says like, meet mediocre and drives away from him when he like fails a jump onto this truck. And basically he becomes completely disheartened and realizes that Joe is no longer going to do any for him. He's like now on Joe's shit list.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And so he, like, his whole dream of like going to Valhalla with Joe, that's gone now. And so he ends up befriending one of the wives.
Yes.
Who ends up kind of getting him to kind of join their side. And so now Nux is on their side, helping out too.
Yeah, exactly.
And ends up sacrificing himself so that they can escape at one point.
Yeah, and they get to the Greenlands.
Aren't so green.
They're not green anymore. They meet up with several of the women who are, from where Furiosa was from.
I believe they're called the Vuvalini or something.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I saw it on IMDb or whatever.
Right.
I have no idea. But
once they're there, they get the idea to drive back.
Well, they find out that the green is gone. Like, in the time the Furiosa's been gone, the green is like, it's drought hit it, it's just gone. It's no longer there. They actually drove through the green and she didn't even realize.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was just destroyed. And then Max, I think, is the one that comes up with the idea that if they have to go somewhere, if Joe's entire force is out after him, why not head back and take his stronghold right out from under him? He has water, he has resources. Take that. You can't have the green. Take that. Take it from him. And so now it's like a reverse chase. They're heading back. And so now instead of Joe trying to stop, and get his wives back, he's trying to stop them from taking his seat of power from him.
Yeah, exactly.
And this leads to just an all-out race with just violent outcomes and lots of death.
It's a big, huge action sequence. Furiosa manages to catch up to Immortan Joe and kill him. And when they get back to the place Immortan Joe was ruler, they get there and they present to everybody Immortan Joe's corpse, and that's it.
And then the people, the impoverished workers, demand that she be taken up to the top to be their new leader.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they basically Joe's underlings basically have to accept her and take her because otherwise they'll lose control.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the basic plot. Again, plot-wise, it's pretty simple.
Plot doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter because this movie is all about the action and the visual spectacle.
It's all aesthetics and action.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It is a gorgeous film. Watching some of these sequences and thinking, yeah, this is cinema.
It's something about the amped up saturation of the colors, the weird setting with all that kind of rustic, homemade, on the, all the vehicles are repurposed vehicles and all that stuff and the high shutter speed and the ratcheted, frame rate, everything kind of adds to this. Yeah.
It gets a fantasy vibe, which, it is. It's a fantasy. It does really good.
Prophecy and religion and all this stuff, which is something you get. I mean, that's also something that was in, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, where you have something that's kind of technically science fiction, but feels more like fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that's Mad Max Fury Road. Anything else to say about it?
No, I mean, that's about it.
I might be reporting back next week on what I think about Furiosa, depending on if we have time. Not sure. Depending on what else we're doing next week, because we don't even know what our topic is next week, but we'll get to that later. That is it for our full spoiler segment. As I mentioned, we don't know what we're doing next week. Tune in, you'll find out. You'll know when we put it out. We'll figure out something to do for our main topic for next week. Who knows? Maybe we'll have a Nintendo Direct to talk about because they said there's one coming in June, right? So who knows? Maybe we'll be talking about that. I don't know. But that's going to be for next week. That's a problem for next week. Until then, thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our website, thetotalscreen.com. If you head over to our website and open up a container story for any of our podcast episodes, scroll down to the bottom paragraph. You'll find all of the relevant links to our SoundCloud page, our RSS feed, everything like that. It's all there. So check that out there. You can also subscribe to this podcast through your favorite podcast client of choice, like Apple Podcasts or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So check that out as well. Thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Hey.
Thank you for listening to the OnScreen podcast, the official podcast of The Total Screen. Visit our website at thetotalscreen.com. This podcast can be found on any major podcast client, including Pocket Cast and Apple Podcast. The entire backlog of this podcast and other content can be found on our YouTube channel.